All right. So today we have Ipsita over here. Ipsita is from Sydney, and she works at New South Wales. She works with New South Wales government, and I'm going to ask Ipsita a few questions. But to start with, Ipsita, why don't you kind of introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Ipsita. I am working with New South Wales government. I'm working with the Department of Education at the moment and redesigning their primary school to high school transition process. So what that involves is there is a process change, but there's also digitization that comes with it. So this is the first time this process will be available in a digital format. So yeah, it has been an exciting journey with them so far. We'll talk about it later as we progress through this talk, but prior to that, I have worked both in public and private sectors. I worked with banks and governments in various capacities. So from service design to experience design, I've done some UX as well. My background is in architecture. I started as an architect way back then. But then very quickly, I sort of sought my calling in service design and experience design. And I have been working in the industry for past 14 years. Yeah.
You know, career path that you have. So in terms of, human-centered design, so what exactly is human-centered design, and where does UI/UX fit in?
Well, as Steve Jobs famously once said, that design is what it looks like and feels like. Design it how it works. So if you think about human-centered design and UX, it really encompasses all aspects of the end user's interactions with an organization, the services it provides, and the products it produces. Really, at the heart of it, design is who does what and why. So you have a person who has needs. So that's the who part of the equation, but they also have a context in which they operate. So when you design, you cannot do that in isolation. You have to look at the context of that person. Does what aspect is, what are they trying to do? What is the objective? So when that aspect looks at objects and activities of their interaction, and then why is their goals. Goals are emotional as well as functional. So neither one is bigger or lesser than the other. So when you're designing, you really have to look at all these aspects. The logic of design, if we think, really is systemics. Design focuses on connections. It is about how things are related and how things act when they're connected. If we think about it, we all live in networks of causal relationships. And if we map the interconnectedness of today's world, the day-to-day actions that we take affect people on the other side of the planet. So nothing is designed in isolation. But the way we understand design, what most of us understand design is what we would call apparent design. What do I mean by that? Apparent design is really, it is the obvious aspect of design. Say, for example, you use your Spotify app. It is the layout of the app. It's the colors they use. It is the interactions that the app has embedded. But then there is also the systemic side of design. And in the systemic side of design, it is how does the design interact with its environment? What are its intended and unintended consequences? How does it interact with other designs? We have recently seen how designs don't work in isolation, especially since the world of APIs was introduced to us. Nobody produces everything. So somebody has done an aspect really well, and then you use that service then. So it's also about thinking about these interactions, that how do we use and reuse things that are available in the industry, in the market. And then also, how does it interact with cultures? If you look at designs that come out from different parts of the world, they will handle the same product in a very, very different way. For example, if you look at news websites that come out of India, they're packed of information. The layout is crowded. Similarly with Japan. But if you look somewhere in Australia, for example, there is way more white space. So there is a cultural connotation and aspect to design as well. Yeah, I can keep going on and on. But yeah, you asked me.
The next question, important question that everybody has today is, how important is design in, daily life?
Yeah, it is. It's significantly important. Like I said, the logic of design is systemics. Systemics means that it cuts across disciplines, it cuts across various aspects of life. Design brings meaning to the conversation. It adds value. Design has intention. It brings intention to the conversation. Say, we all engage in design, all of us. From designing, say, for example, our filing systems to the layout of our living rooms or our careers, the capacity of design really is what distinguishes us as humans. In fact, when archaeologists excavate and look for fossil records, they're actually looking for things that could have been works of humans. So essentially, if you look at it, design is what makes us human. Like I said, design creates value. That is why more and more businesses are now interested in looking at design and bringing that into the fold. It gives them competitive edges. It makes products more desirable. It makes services efficient and user-friendly. It adds, like I said, it adds meaning. The competency to design allowed people to create their social systems at one point in time. If we look back in history, it allowed them to make sense of a very dangerous and chaotic world. And if you think about it, all the major achievements in human history, which we usually attribute to chance or discovery, are really acts of design. We talk about the wheel. It wasn't invented, it was designed. It would have been an iterative process. They would have had failed prototypes to get to one that works, Another way in which design is important is that a very important axiom of design is change. Change is brought about by human intervention in systems. Change is inevitable. Therefore, intention is invaluable when it comes to change. Intention gives direction to change. Design brings that intention to the conversation. When we design systems, we make judgments like, do we want to humanize this or do we want to dehumanize this? These are not value judgments, if you think about it. It's evaluating whether getting people out of the equation is more productive, does it make the system more reliable, or do we want to augment people in what they're doing and not take them out of the equation entirely? So intention is a parameter that you dial in of what you want out of the system. Design also brings purpose into existence. It's how it connects, whatever you're designing, it's how that connects with the world, how it acts on the world. It is about outcomes. Sustainability, for example, is a big conversation point these days. But we forget that it's not a standalone thing. For example, we talk about water scarcity in the coming years as a big pain point in the world, but we forget, like, how will that happen, and how are people living halfway across the globe contributing to that? It is, say, for example, the big river systems are fed by these glaciers in mountain ranges somewhere, like the Himalayas, for example. And these glaciers every year are shrinking in size. How does that happen? It's because you would say global warming, but yeah, but how? Again, if you go a step back, you think it's because we're burning fossil fuels. What are we burning these fossil fuels for? One answer for that is to power the endless number of digital devices we're surrounded by. We forget about that when we charge our iPhones or iPads or computers, but really each of us in some way is contributing to that, to a problem, a major problem that the world is facing in some parts of the world. So unless you bring that purpose into the conversation of design, sustainability is really a concept. And finally, I think that design by definition is about serving. Design is, why is it important? It's on behalf of the other. It's in service of the other. Art, for example, is for the sake of art. Science is about exploring an area of interest to the scientist, whereas design is a discipline that solves a problem for the other. It's not for itself. It's not for the designer. It's not for its own sake either. Designers are forever in systemic relationships with others rather. So that's another aspect how design comes into the equation, and that's why it is important.
Yeah, just to add on to whatever you have been speaking and giving out all the information. What I feel is, in terms of daily human life, design is more towards a communicative form, because when you brought up the issue about the caveman and the ancient people, obviously they used a lot of pictorial designs to communicate the entire thing. So I'm sure you would also agree that design does a little bit, not a little bit, a lot in terms of everyday communication as well. We go to any kind of railway station or airports, we see a lot of symbols out there. So that is also kind of, I would feel, that very important part of design communication that we have in today's day-to-day life.
Definitely. A lot of, sorry, go on.
Yes, and the other aspect which comes to my mind in the everyday, day-to-day life of design is, isn't it the entire universe a great design? How the things are moving around and how everything is planned, and how the human body is actually designed to function in a way. Obviously functionality is part of the science, the biological science, and we leave it out there. But then the design, the placement of the entire body structure or anything, I mean, whatever you look around, it's everywhere. It's kind of a great design. What do you think?
Exactly, totally. In fact, we live in such designed world that there's nothing natural around us, if you think about it, around most of us. Even the parks that we go to and we think, oh, nature, it's not. Somebody has designed it. Even the trees outside, somebody has curated it so that the branches lean in one direction and not the other direction, so it shades the road and doesn't enter somebody's house. It's all designed.
Yeah.
So you're right. Like our lives are so intrinsically designed that we don't even realize. Like us sitting warm and dry in these rooms, talking across these digital medium. It's somebody has designed these things.
Yes, you're right. All right. So moving on, what are the various challenges faced by you in the whole concept of this human centered design, adoption by the clients and by the managers, or even the end users?
Challenges faced by in adoption, did you say?
Yes.
I mean, yes, there is a lot more appetite now for design than there was, say, even a few years ago. Some companies understand it much better than others, but there still are challenges. It is. I'm not sure how it is with software development, but Agile, for example, was a buzzword at one point, and a lot of people committed to Agile, but didn't really do Agile. Similarly, with design, you find that more and more people want to have UX designers on the team or service designers on the team, but either the funding is limited, or then whatever comes out of these design processes, is not implemented because probably they're still development houses. They're more focused on giving more time and resources and funding to developers than to designers. Or there is a perception in management that they know what the user problem is or the user need is because either they know or the competition is doing this. So a lot of shortcuts get taken, or a lot of waste is created because either the needs aren't really well defined up in the beginning, or because not enough time has been taken to do research, or you produce, and what that leads to is production of a lot of artifacts by UX designers that gets then thrown out of the window because there isn't enough time to address these functionalities or needs. So yeah, the challenges are there still. I think there is need for further education and adoption.
All right, moving on. What is your opinion? How has design evolved over the past few years?
It has. So let's say typically how organizations use designers is that designers are engaged at artifacts level, the periphery really. A need is articulated and they say, okay, we need to design for this. So what comes out of this engagement are really products and services that are solutions for very specific problems that were, like I said, either identified by business or management. So for example, let's say you want to redesign the shopping experience. You would, how would you approach that? You would probably make the checkouts more streamlined, or you would do something about people not abandoning their carts, or make it more sensory. We would call it service interaction design. And like I said, it operates at the periphery. But what happens when something else becomes a roadblock, right? Let's say you manage to create the best in-store or digital experience. However, if the process for handling customer complaints isn't designed, or the returns policy is not customer friendly, chances are that you will end up with disappointed and irate customers, which eventually will affect the bottom line. If you take the human-centered design approach far enough, you're bound to encounter organizational issues. I'll give you an example. We all have gone through this, that you've had a problem with something, you call the customer care line, and after waiting on hold for a long time, you get to speak to somebody, you tell them your story, and after you've done that, the person gets back and says, actually, it's not me you need to talk to, it's that department over there, and I'll transfer you now. And you get transferred, and that other person has no idea who you are and what your story is and what your problem is. And now you have to repeat yourself again And that's frustrating. That's extremely frustrating. While this handoff might make sense from an internal departmental structure point of view, but it's really bad experience. And if we let design come to this level of an organization, we would come up with something that we can call, which has been really dubbed as intervention design. These are not my terminologies. These are terminologies in the industry. So service design or human-centered design carried out at the outer layers starts to shed light on the inefficiencies of the structures and processes embedded in the deeper layers of the organization. So while influencing this change can be tricky, like extremely tricky, and resistance can be incredible, but this, if handled well and handled and given a space, it can be a very, very powerful tool for organizational transformation. Because in today's world, like I mentioned earlier, when the complexity and pace of change is accelerated exponentially and it keeps going up and up all the time, and the speed of communication and access to information has increased like never before. And the barrier to entry in markets are so low, the need to stay current and relevant is really urgent and prescient. So where one understands that an organization needs stability to function well, but it also needs change to survive. And that's where design comes in. So these design engagements at the outer layers can start to shed information on what needs to change organizationally for the company, the brand, the organization to stay relevant, and for the evolution of the brand, essentially.
All right. So moving on to the next question is, how educated is the software industry to see the values in investing in a good UI UX for their existing or their new product? What do you see over there?
Depends. There are companies, software companies that are really, really invested. So design, whether that's service design or UX design, is not an add-on. It's not an add-on. It's embedded in the fabric of the organization. It's not discussed separately. But then there are also people in the market where it's just a checkbox. So you are interested, but the funding is extremely low, or the space design gets to play in is extremely limited, or if the deadlines are prescient, then guess who needs to compromise? Design, not development. So it is a wide spectrum out there at the moment. Yeah.
So basically, you're trying to say that, in terms of software companies, they are not, 100% educated, or, sometimes they are educated, but then they don't have enough funding. But primarily the whole budget goes towards more of the development rather than design. That's what you're trying to say.
Yes. Also because traditionally these software houses have been run by developers. If you look at the CEOs and the directors of these software houses, they really come from a development background. They're programmers, software engineers, and they understand that really, really well. So it really needs, for design to get a voice and a foothold and a seat at the adults' table, so as to speak, you need champions. You need champions who, even though they don't understand design as well as they understand development, give it that space. Or you need leaders who are designers at the same level as, say, a tech director. So I think organizations need design directors now.
I think you basically need somebody to fight for the design rather than, I mean,
Yeah.
but you need a fighter over here so that you can fight with the development team in terms of
Oh,
getting their
trust me,
out.
designers are forever fighting, forever. Like it's the bane of designers' existence. But what, in my experience, I have found is that where it works well is when you have buy-in from top management. You need a champion high up there. You need,
You need
otherwise,
somebody to kind of understand the importance of the design so that they can implement, and they can at least have a thought, or maybe 10%, 20%, I'm not sure how much, but somewhere down the line he should have the design mindset in his heart, and they should
yeah.
put that thing in them. That's what it needs. In terms of my next question is, how do you execute a design strategy for a new startup or a design, kind of transformation of a product? Is there like an SDLC of design, or is there a life cycle that you follow, or something that we can get information
Yeah.
about?
Well, there are a few different frameworks that you could use. But traditionally, if you think about it, back in the day when Agile wasn't the way to do things, everything was waterfall, right? And design was waterfall as well. So what you did was you did your uh, research, you categorize the problems, you created your journey maps and your personas, you ran ideation exercises, generated ideas, built prototypes, and then you sent out final prototypes to the developers who did their own thing, did the QA testing, and then you launched a product which would go out on a CD. And it was really tightly interwoven with the Moore's law, which was the number of transition on a integrated circuit doubled every 2 years. So everything was on a 24-month cadence, whether that was design or business or development cycles. Everything was tuned around that. And then when the, what do you call it, the multi-core architecture, when that came about, and it hacked Moore's law, companies en masse turned towards Agile. And the focus of Agile was rapid iteration. So what you were doing is that you were shipping features every 2 to 4 weeks. And you were evolving product over time. So it wasn't perfection you were aiming for. It was, you were treating product design and development as an experiment. So you launched a feature, saw how it works out there in the market. If there are shortcomings with it, you fix that. If it didn't work, you took it out, or you iterated it in the next release. What happened in this scenario is that design, especially UX design, became a blocker because you didn't have that much time to do your research and your journey mapping and creation of artifacts, because artifacts needed to be churned out so quickly. So what people did was they hired young graphic designers who were capable of doing a decent job, but they weren't really UX designers. But what was happening at the same time was that companies like Apple were coming out, and people were seeing that a design-led business could become the most valuable brand in the world, and they wanted some of that. So what happened was that far too many businesses and people wrongly thought of UX as a visual design. Now coming to frameworks, how did people have proposed various frameworks to overcome this? One was the lean UX methodology. Jeff Gothelf's, and most people must have heard of this. So what it was that it was practicing UX in an agile environment, where classic UX was requirements-based. Lean UX was mostly outcomes-based. So you didn't aim for perfection. And designers in this scenario were really under immense pressure to fill sprint backlogs before they even really understood what is that they're designing for, what is the problem. Remember in the beginning we said who does what and why? There was no time to explore that. It was mostly about doing a decent enough job and making it look decent. And a lot of development cycles got burnt up on features that never really made the final product. So it experienced a lot of waste, this lean UX methodology. To overcome that, then Jake Knapp and Google Ventures came up with the design sprint. It's based on the HCD methodologies proposed by IDEO and D School, Stanford's D School. What it is the design sprint is classic UX, the waterfall methodology, but at an incredibly low fidelity. The goal of the design sprint is to take all the existing research about the problem, whether that's in business, whether that's any pre-hand research that you have done with your users, or even internally for that matter, in an organizational setup, and then to unpack that research to a diverse group of people. So it's vital that this be a cross-disciplinary group because you don't have time, essentially. So you want to get the most out of all the different disciplines simultaneously, or at within a very short period of time. And then you ideate like crazy. So ideations are funneled through lenses of human-centered design, and those ideas that survive are then prioritized. So what happens really is that designers in this setup build really low fidelity prototypes, like barely good enough to show to a potential user. And then you test these and iterate very, very quickly, and the fidelity increases as the sprint goes on. And then at the end of 5 days, if I didn't mention it, it is a 5-day sprint. So at the end of 5 days, you have a validated set of options that you could then take to high fidelity design and build mode. But then there is another way of dealing, another framework of design is what we call the dual track design. Most people must have heard of the double diamond approach that was proposed by the British Council of Design. So what it does is that it keeps research, it has a research track, and then it has a development track. So in the first diamond, you discover what the problems or the needs of your end users are, and you define how you could solve for those problems, right? Like these definitions can be in the form of storyboards, concept models, sketches, sitemaps, content strategy, and then you start creating prototypes. These are prototypes these are design prototypes. So the fidelity can increase over time, but one has to realize the higher the fidelity, the more the cost. So it really depends on the circumstance. And once you've done that, you've tested these prototypes with users, you send it over to the developers, who then take it into development mode. So really what you're doing is you're decoupling design sprint from the development sprint. And the design sprint is always a little bit ahead of the development sprint. So all the artifacts that have come out of the design sprint are fed into the development sprint while the designers are looking at the next problem or iteration even. And this one is, I suppose, the most popular at the moment, especially in companies that we said are more mature in their approach towards design.
So moving forward, what are the best, I wouldn't say best, but what are your most favorite, internationally designed UI UX products something that inspires you and you've been a fan of them?
Um, a few years ago, digital services, government digital services in UK redesigned govt.uk.
Yeah, I know.
I am a big fan of that. That was an incredible undertaking, and they have since developed a design language and many, many things. But that what they did was essentially that they developed this portal, which was a single point where I think at that point it was 13 different ministries, if I'm not mistaken. Could be more now. So what they did was that they looked at it from a user's point of view, a citizen's point of view. And they thought, okay, say for example, if there's a birth in the family, what needs to be done? You need to apply for a birth certificate. You need to look for immunizations or whatever the other things are. Instead of, oh, this belongs to the Department of Family Welfare, this belongs to child something or the other. They looked at it from the user's point of view and then laid out the content in that sense, which made sense to the end user. I highly recommend people check that out. So yeah, that is one that I'm really a big fan of. This year I have been really impressed with an agency called Build in Amsterdam. They do some really good work. Their website is also phenomenally good. Bureaucratic is another one. Bureaucratic with a K. CX Partners is another one that. There are many more.
Okay, just coming back to in terms of international design and some of our previous questions. When you say design is culturally, more of culture, and it's like, let's say you gave an example where Indian newspapers have a lot of content, Japanese have a lot of content, but Australians have a little bit more white space. How is it that certain companies, let's say for example, primarily let's say Apple, iOS, how is it that it appeals to a larger audience? For example, somebody in the Gulf region also likes it, and somebody in the Korean region also likes it. How is it that it is, how do we do something which is likable by a global audience? What do you think?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. How that is done is through segmentation. So when Apple designs its products, it thinks of a user group. Well, I think it's in their mission statement also, they say that it's about the creative types. So they don't design for everybody. They design for the creative type. Now everybody has an Apple product, like you said, not just the creators, even accountants have Apple products. But when they design, they keep that user group in their focus. They design for that user group. And then they research like crazy with that group, see what sticks, what doesn't stick. They prototype, they iterate, they test with these people, God alone knows how much. And this cohort is not so much, they're based in Dubai or they're based in Japan. It's more the coming of age thing. There is a concept in marketing where the experiences that a cohort has when they come of age, when they're 15, 16, 17, 18, around that, influences that generation. So that's why you will see that brands and companies are very keen on reaching out to that group, because it's, once you have them, you get the brand loyalty from them. So if you catch them at that age and you sell to them and you appeal to them, then you have them. It's very difficult to acquire a customer. It's easier to retain a customer. So in that sense, Apple has done its research with a cohort, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they belong in a certain geography. It's a type of type of people that they're addressing. And that type, whether that they're in Japan or Dubai, they find the fonts and the layouts attractive. And it's not by chance. There is a lot of testing that has gone into it, a lot of iteration that has gone into it.
Yeah, just to add on the brand point, I also feel, once the people are loyal to the brand, they kind of a little bit ignore if it's a bad design or if it's a bad UX and just give it to the brand. For example, if you remember a few years ago, Instagram changed their entire logo to something
Yes.
really kind of funny. I mean, there was still a lot of loyalty, and they have just grown. I mean, it's
Yes.
not that it's not that the logo that matters, but yes, there was a lot of talk about in the whole social community about how they changed the logo. And ultimately the thing is that it has the brand loyalty. So what you're saying is Apple or all these companies, they approach a certain age group which they find that, okay, these are kind of easy targets for us to appeal our design to them, and then kind of retain those customers as a brand loyal customers. That's what you're
What these companies are really good at doing is, see, and this applies to anybody and everybody. You cannot be everything to everybody. So you've got to pick your segment. You've got to know that I can solve the problem of that group really, really well. And then you've got to target that group. So Apple, talking about them because we are, spends gazillion dollars on targeting that group. So it's not by chance that they think, oh no, I like this. There is a lot of behavioral psychology used to make them feel that I like this. The advertising, the subliminal messaging, or even, if Serena Williams likes Apple, then I like Apple. If Roger Federer likes Apple, then I like Apple. There's a lot, there's a lot of comparison in that sense also. They use all the techniques. So it's not by chance that happens. But then you also have to position yourself. So there's segmentation, there's targeting, there's positioning. So a brand needs to position itself to make inroads in that segment, into that segment that it wants to target, essentially. Positioning has an experiential side where what is the experience of this brand like? What does it smell like? What does it touch like? What does the app look like? What is the music of the brand? But and then the other peripheral aspects are, what are the colors of the brand, for example? What is the font like? How does that make me feel? So it is all by design, essentially. You kind of have to look at these three groups to then come up with something for that group that you're targeting.
Okay, so moving on, how, in all these, research and chaos about design and, implementing and fighting and everything, how do you keep updating yourself? How does one, keep learning, and what do you do?
There are many, many, many resources out there. There's a lot of content on YouTube. You could follow universities like Stanford, D-School. You could follow Rhode Island School of Design online. IDEO puts up content online. There are courses on Coursera that you could do for free. Medium has articles on it. Fast Company has articles. So there is no dearth of content and information.
Okay, and in terms of, the big question here is, in today's world, to other design companies or other software development companies who are trying to get their design across client, how does one convince a client for taking, for talking the human-centered approach. Any tips that you'd like to share?
I think by making it collaborative and co-creating with the clients. So one thing that design really needs to sort of shape up in is providing data to clients or higher up to the management on what they're proposing and why they're proposing what they're proposing. It's so what happens because of that is that it's you're influencing, you're not mandating, and nobody likes to be mandated. And when you co-create, people feel valued and validated, especially if you consult them in the early research phases or in your low fidelity prototype sketching phase. If you get their feedback and if it is in a low fidelity format, people are more comfortable giving you feedback because it's nothing precious. Like, they're not making you waste days and days of work. It's something really scrappy that you've drawn on a piece of paper, and they can tell you, oh, that's never going to work because this interacts with that, and that system doesn't talk to this system. And so it's really valuable. And what happens is that when you engage people like that, they're more likely to support and accept this change. And you want champions when you do that. Another tip I would give is that start small. You prototype a small aspect of whatever change you want to see. What this allows you to do is this allows you to test the change that you're proposing. You can gain insights and then iterate accordingly if you have to. It also helps you to look at organizational systems that need to evolve, like we discussed earlier. And it reduces the risk of failure significantly because you're testing ongoingly and iterating. And what it also does is that it provides quick wins to show people what might change and what change might look like. And that gets traction in. And because you've co-created with these people, you get their buy-in, you get their support. When you bring people into the process of creation, at the end of the day, it's not selling the idea to them, but it's coming to the idea that has been collectively defined. And if people feel that their contributions are heard, they're more receptive to being part of what comes out of the process, I would say.
Okay. So what are the tips that you'd like to give to the younger generation, opting for a digital design career?
I would say explore, not just your field, other fields as well. Could be psychology, could be history, arts, typography, technology. Read more, have many interests, be curious, question everything, including your own take on things. Ask how else can this be solved, and what is the purpose that this thing that I'm designing is going to have.
Yeah, so finally, I have a few very quick questions. So what's your favorite font?
My favorite font, I think, would have to be Knockout and Landmark, both by Jonathan Hoffler, by the way.
Okay, and what's your favorite brand logo?
I really like simple designs, simple things that stand out. So I would say the BBC logo. It's 3 letters in 3 squares, but it's so iconic. You could identify it anywhere. Or for that matter, the signage is like, it's not a logo, it's a signage, but the London Underground. It's this red circle with a blue band, for those who have seen it. It stands out. Immediately know that there's an underground station there, and especially because for those people who've gone to London, know how overcast and grey it is. So it kind of stands out so beautifully. So yeah, that's some really good design. But having said that, I really like the Instagram redesigned logo as well.
Yeah, but I think they've gone through a lot of iterations, and the logo that we have right now is kind of really beautiful in terms of
Yeah.
what they came out immediately just after they wanted to change their logo. So yeah, that's I think it's for the good. In terms of your, what is your favorite tool that you use every day?
I would say paper and pencil.
Really?
That is my favorite. Yeah.
So you like to kind of draw out ideas and
Yeah.
write down stuff.
Other than that, because we're all in COVID work from home situation these days, the tool that I use to collaborate with my team more and more every day is Miro now. But I mean, nothing takes over a whiteboard or paper and pencil.
So what's your favorite website? I'm sure you will be, you already told us, but maybe you can tell us again.
Besides the ones that I have mentioned earlier, I think google.com, because
Okay.
that's the one I
Very simple,
more.
gives you everything that you feel like.
It has answers for all my questions.
Okay. And what's your favorite app?
My favorite app rather would have to be TripView. It's this app here that gives you timings of public transport, so buses, trains. It tells you when to expect the next train and how late it is and what is the frequency. So, and it's really nicely designed. So yeah, TripView, I'd say. Other than that, Google Maps.
Okay, that's good. All right, thank you so much for your time, and it was lovely speaking to you.
Likewise.
All right.